What is up, interwebs? Going to go over a metal rendering tutorial here. Over the weekend, whipped up this image of Lady Death, and I drew the chair in about an hour. Really just threw it all together. And if you go zoom in on it, it's really rough. It's a very rough state, but the whole point was just to give a rough idea and quick idea. Okay, well, here's how you can get decent results, and then you can go and detail at your leisure. You work on it as much as you want, because detail is just a factor of time once you got everything roughed in. But the request came up for, well, how do you draw metals? How do you handle the rendering of metallic items and in a pretty reasonable manner, without taking forever? How do you get all that blocked in? And the easiest answer, and the hardest at the same time, is practice and analysis. Now, creativity is a word that's thrown around in art all the time, but the analytical side, sometimes there's not a lot of emphasis on it, and not as much as there should be, in my opinion. But you really have to learn to analyze the world around you, analyze items, take them apart in your head, and then put them back together in a completely new form. And in this case, if you were to start looking at metals, well, you have, pitted old bronze. It's been hammered on, a lot of light and dark areas. If you take a look at the spread of highlights to shadows, okay, not that big. And then you get into, say, some brushed aluminum. Actually, there's rust, so this is going to be steel. Maybe it's galvanized at one point, and that's worn away. But still, you have your highlighted areas, you have your shadowed areas, you have all your grunge and dirt, and then you have your nice brand new musical instruments with really high reflective surfaces, and obviously there's this nice warm orange-yellow tone throughout. And if you really go in close on it, you see that what's being reflected, it's not random, it's the room around it. So anything that's highly reflective, you're essentially drawing a curved mirror. It's distorting all the space around it. It's all there, all the information's there. So you can tell, you can see the things on the walls, you can see the window. I'm willing to bet there's probably the photographer in here somewhere. So part of what you have to decide is, how beat up is it? Is it brand new? What metal is it? Brass, bronze, aluminum, steel? What polish level? And it's your world, do what you want with it. And just to keep things simple, I went ahead and put together just these random shapes, as though, like, if you were going to do this chair up close, high res, and you were going to render every one of these little pieces out instead of rough them in, which they're almost abstract, when you really get close to them. So I'm just going to take these random shapes, and I'm going to start with a black and white layer, a color layer, and I largely do this so you're never stuck with anything. So if you want to change your lighting, you can change the black and white layer without affecting the color layer, which is typically an overlay, but could be a hard or soft light, sometimes multiply as well. And then a detail layer, and got another layer to make some notes if need be. So I'm going to go ahead and start on my flats layer, which is all these blocks of color, just random, and start deciding, are these raised areas? Are they depressions? I'll keep the lighting simple and just come from the right hand corner at a 45-degree angle, just simple, and start working in some grayscale. And the flats layer, used in comics a lot. I recommend using them just so you can select the areas you want to work in and not color outside the lines. So I'm just going to start with these center areas, and maybe this is a raised area, maybe these are depressions. So go to your black and white, say about a 50% gray. I'll start filling those in. And if this is really shiny, you're going to have very light highlights dark shadows. So if the light is coming from this upper corner, and this is a raised area, that means you're going to have highlights on this side, the peaking center of it. You're going to have a few over here on this edge, this area where it curves around. Take the brush density down, start building that up, and then for the shadows, about 80-90% black. Work the other side. If you screw up, that's fine. Control Z or just do it again. Just build up that depth, and you can always come back and just detail to your heart's content. And then these areas, if these are depressions, your highlight's going to be on the opposite edge. Get in there, and the rest will be in shadow. Switch over to the pencil tool so I can get some harder edges. All the way black. That way there's a very defined edge. And switching over to the fingertip just to push that over just a little bit. And same thing down here. Quick and easy. Because this is a depression area, you're not going to have a lot of light highlights. Even if there's a little bit of a curve to it, you're not going to see too much. In fact, it could be detrimental even adding that, so just go darker with it. Get up as you go along, nothing wrong with that. Okay, so raised area, depression areas, and move to the next section. Back to the flats. Center section, you could say this is kind of a flat area, but there's still going to be reflections here and there. So back to about the 50% gray. Drop that in. Just add a few lines here and there as though it's reflecting what's in its world. Just like in that saxophone down here. Some random shapes. A few darker areas in those. And don't forget your shadows that are going to be cast from this raised area. Just going to move them around a little bit with the fingertip. Rough it in quick. You can always come back in and add more later. And then the outside edge, treat that like it's a knife blade. So just select that area real quick. A little darker on the gray this time. Drop it in. There's still some of the flat showing through, that's no problem. Because what you can do is just put an underlayer of this gray underneath all that, and it'll cover all that up, it'll go away. So start adding in some highlights here and there. Just keep track of where your light direction's coming from. Add in the shadows, the opposite sides. So in a few minutes time, got something reasonable, something to start with. Again, just taking into account where the reflections would be, where the highlights would be, and adding a few specular highlights here and there. It's really going to sell it. Brightest areas. Skip back and forth. Where these other things are starting to show through over them. So you don't have that weird green bleeding through there. It might actually make things better, you don't know yet. And then just select the whole thing. To the color layer, and maybe it's some sort of bronze, so like a brownish orange. Drop that on. See what it looks like. If you like it, change it if you don't. Yeah, so go for something a little bit brighter. And then this will really start showing you where you need to continue to work those areas to get them to stand out. So like on this, it's just barely there. So skip back. Select that area. Back to the black and white. Start defining it better. Bit of a line right on the edge, just to help define it. Deepen the shadows back here. Stand out. Start giving it that metallic quality. Add a Alright, screwed that up a little bit. Nope. Now that's going to happen every now and then. I didn't lock the flats layer. No big deal. So, If you do this, it's a good example of what happens when things go wrong, and they will. Just select first area, shift over to the others, select the inverse, make sure you're on the right spot. Pencil's a good one for this. And just color it back in. In this case, you don't want to skip outside of this whole thing because you do have the whole area selected, but it's an easy fix. It's one of those Bob Ross not so happy accidents. Tell us all about happy little trees and happy little cabins and not so happy little flat layers. Alright, so deselect it, locking it this time. And back to it. Getting highlights in on the black and white layer. Some of that spill over a little bit. It's not quite a perfectly flat edge, so it's catching the edges on this side. Some other light sources here and there throughout the room, windows and whatnot. And you just start working smaller and smaller. Blend those in a little bit. Now, if there are other colors in the room, that's also going to reflect on this and change it. So, like if you have something blue reflecting in the room, it's going to combine with this yellowish orange, so you're going to get more of a greenish color. So, green underneath, like I said, could work out. So you can actually add that to your color layer. Work in a little bit of that here and there, just whatever's in the room reflecting that. Just blend it in, just subtly, to go crazy with it. Some darker areas here and there. Just making it up as you go along, so just play with it. And skip back down to these little guys. Just provide an overall shadow. So it's easier to tell that those are deeper. Nice and simple. Okay, so you got something that's reasonable. You can work with that a lot more. You add details, take some away. And one thing I like to do is, I'm a big fan of adding dirt. And even if it's subtle, grunge maps, it helps sell it. So deselect everything, cut and paste that in. rotate it around, change the size till it covers. This time I'm going to just select everything. Back to the grunge map. Select the inverse and delete. Now just go through the different blending options. Find something that adds a bit of dirt, and it's as subtle or as crazy as you want it. Be really filthy, a little pitted. To add that bit of noise. Something like that. Again, it's that easy. And if you're not fond of the color, change it. It's easy to turn it into aluminum. Desaturate the whole thing. Up. Change the color completely. Easy enough. Alright, so hope that helps. Go draw, practice. It's easy. It's really easy. And you can sit here and just noodle on this till it looks as photoreal as you want if you want to put the time in. So, simple enough. Have a good one.